Robert Sullivan of the Los Angeles Free Press says this movie lacks the documentary realism of a film like The Candidate, but in its way, the political insights it has to offer are equally as profound. Vincent Canby of the New York Times says the film is much more interested in contemplating incompetence than in presenting any ideas about politics, race relations, international diplomacy, personal ambition, courage, or what have you. And Letterboxd user Joe Campbell tees us up perfectly by saying, "I would love to see a remake of this today, as I think now, more than ever, we need something like this." On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we decide the fate of the man.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters.
Hello, everybody.
It's Ruined Childhoods time.
Welcome to our podcast. Dan, there weren't very many reviews to pull from for the intro.
No, well, this, our movie for today, The Man, is, as we'll discuss, it wasn't even originally intended for a theatrical release.
No, which leads me to believe that there weren't a lot of pre-screenings for the press. It seemed like that was kind of a last-minute decision to get it out there. But anyway, there were a few, and that's when I was like, well, better just go on the internet and see what people say. But Rotten Tomatoes, there was only one review. So,
well, and yeah, I guess, I mean, I don't know how much was known about this movie at the time. Like, I don't know if when it came out, all the critics knew that, oh, yes, well, this was made for TV and then it was pushed into a theatrical release. I feel like that, because I'm listening to some, I'm, hearing the reviews that you pulled for the intro, and
right.
And it's kind of like, I don't know if that was what this movie was supposed to be.
Yeah. But anyway, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a little bit. Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing okay, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine here. So we are recording this on February 10th of 2021. And I'm here in Portland, Oregon, and we're supposed to maybe be getting some snow starting tomorrow night, which we haven't really had. We had like some flurries this year, but nothing did anything. So we're lined up for a few days of potential snow. I'm wondering if it's like that for you up in Seattle, Dan.
It is up here in Seattle. We are expecting snow starting in 2 days on the 12th. So we'll see. This is
a very different winter for potential snow days. It doesn't mean what it used to mean.
Yeah, I don't. The high school students that I teach, one of them asked the other day, like, "What do we do in the event of a snow day?" And I was like, "What? Like this? Go." Like, open, get up when your alarm goes off. When your alarm goes off 1 minute before class, turn on your computer, because the district, Seattle public schools are for those, not in the Seattle area. It is Seattle is 100% virtual learning, and we have been since last March. So much like, oh my God, I'm blanking on his name, but much like the guy from Trekkies, you're on the internet. Oh yeah, Gabriel, right?
No, Gabriel's his friend.
No. Oh,
Gabriel, this is the worst time you could be calling.
Oh yes, was it Peter? Peter, was that his name?
It might be. He was also on the show Beat the Geeks.
Yes,
he was the Star Trek geek. Anyway,
no, I wasn't the friend.
Well.
I feel like the friend was Peter and he was Gabriel.
Oh, was he Gabriel? Maybe he was Gabriel and the friend was Peter.
Another interesting thing that...
Oh, for God's sakes. I'll get that.
You're the one that told me to...
Hello? Okay. Peter, this is the worst time you could have called. Go away! Okay, bye.
Yes. No. Yes. He's Gabriel Kerner, who is a and he's become a visual effects artist.
Oh, which makes sense because in the movie Trekkies, he's showing his computer generated model of a ship. So
Which
considering
considering when that footage was filmed for Trekkies,
impressive.
It was, quite impressive. And yeah, he's been nominated for an Emmy. So
hey, that's great.
Yeah, no,
So you're right, it was Gabriel. So that's going to come back later. We'll talk about
Peter.
that later.
This is the worst time you could have called me. Yes, and as it turns out, he probably made the right decision by not taking the phone call.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Hope he built that shelf that he wanted to build.
He did have some minor quibbles with that uniform design.
Right.
That woman hand stitched.
If
for him to
anybody
wear at the
hasn't
convention.
seen the documentary Trekkies, you have to.
Oh,
it's
wonderful.
One of the best. Just it's not about a super serious subject. You're not going to find yourself making any giant life changes because of it. But if you're just looking for something about interesting people who are fans of Star Trek, then Trekkies is your movie. It's a delight.
Yeah. I mean, really, if you think about big fandoms, as we know them now, it kind of started with, I feel like Star Trek kind of was the first to really have that global, really devoted fan base.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm wondering if the fan base, well, clearly the show in the 60s was a huge success. And then I'd have to go back and watch Trekkies to see if it goes into it, but to see when it really exploded. If it wasn't until after the movies started coming out, or
no, it was between, and I don't know, I haven't seen Trekkies in a while, but I guess I've watched it enough that I remember. It was after, so I think Star Trek ran for 4 seasons, and it was when it started.
That sounds about right.
In syndication, late 60s, maybe early 70s. I think that was when it kind of all started up, which is why then by the end of the 70s, you have Star Trek the Motion Picture coming out in 79. So
but shortly after another major fandom science fiction movie, Star Wars, came out, featuring the voice talents of James Earl Jones, the star of The Man.
Yeah. So before we get into
just
it,
to be clear, though, we're not covering the movie The Man starring Samuel L. Jackson and Eugene Levy.
Yes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Eugene Levy.
Although I'd love to give that another look. But no, this is the 1972 movie The Man, directed by Joseph Sargent. Most known for Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, but for us, it's probably Jaws: The Revenge.
Yeah, that and The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, a movie that I watched. I rewatched that not too long ago, the original.
I hear it's great. I haven't seen it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, whenever you have the time, it is a great. As you know, I've been on this 70s, late 60s, and 70s movie kick.
Sure.
And yeah, I think that was towards the early part of that phase. I was going to say stage, and then anyway. So
phage.
But yeah, the Fage yogurt.
Before we get super into this, did you have anything else that you wanted to add about Air Force One?
No, I mean, other than get off my plane. I don't know.
No, I think we said everything there was to say about Air Force One. Yeah, cool. So The Man was written by Rod Serling, adapted from an Irving Wallace novel that apparently was incredibly long and difficult to read, but Rod Serling managed to boil it down into a nice hour and a half. Almost made for TV movie, but then actually had a theatrical release.
Yeah. And I guess if I can, I'm going to do a little self-promotion, but
do it.
Speaking of Rod Serling, so for those unfamiliar with the podcast or with what I do teach language arts at high school in the Seattle area. Well, I'm at West Seattle High School. I'm going to be telling you that in just a moment, because I also direct their fall theater productions for the past few years. And if you want to hear in depth about it, you can listen to our episode on A Few Good Men back in the archives.
That was the last play that you did there.
Yeah, that was the back when we have live theater.
Right.
So in facing our current circumstances, we decided to take Twilight Zone episodes and adapt them for the virtual stage.
Which is really cool. I'm really excited to hear it.
It's like a weird radio play, and it's available if you go to westsidedrama.com. That is westsidedrama.com. By the time this is out, you should be able to
Is that
access
.calm?
.com. Sorry.
Com?
Yeah, .com. Com. You're trying to get me to okay. Sorry. I was in a meeting this afternoon, and there were so many entendres going on, and I was like trying so hard not to laugh. It was like, you said come, and it was
oh boy,
there was context to the conversation, but yeah.
So this Twilight
Rod
Zone
Serling
radio play that you've got going on, I mean, it'll have already debuted by the time that we are releasing this episode, but it's going to stay up there, right? Or what's the story?
For perpetuity. This is the joys of virtual theater. And what's cool is because we're working in this kind of undiscovered genre, unexplored genre, we were not really bound by anything. Like, the official title of the show is the Twilight Zone radio dramas, and we have like we have a couple of Foley artists who you'll see in their little Microsoft Teams squares, because our district doesn't have Zoom. Though I feel like Zoom is like Kleenex now. You say Zoom and it's just the catch-all. So you've got the Foley artists, but then we also added in some sound effects and some visual backgrounds and some music, and we created ads for some local West Seattle businesses, especially businesses that could probably use a little boost at this time. And so we've got ads in there that are kind of 1950s style. It's going to be in black and white. And it actually, you said that you can't wait to hear it and
see it. Yeah.
Well, no. But it really is like, what's really cool is like, as I'm watching it and I'm watching all the edits, we have the students have been editing it. Students wrote the ads. Like, it's we're really working to teach and empower these kids. So they, so I'm as I'm watching it, like I'm watching it for things, but then I'm also at times closing my eyes and listening, and it really does have that feel of a radio show with some obviously piped in music. I had a former student who plays the harp record some harp solos.
That's so cool.
To use. Yeah, it was just kind of like, it was the fun type of thing where we kept kind of reminding ourselves like, hey, we really don't need to like stick with any, like, our only boundaries are the ones that either we set for ourselves or that like our boundaries of doing this remotely. So,
right.
It was a lot of fun. I did a lot of like drop offs, like dropping off. We got mics, like ordered, mics, so they would all be using the same mics,
right?
And some pop screens. So really cool, really fun. Check it out. That's westsidedrama.com. Twilight Zone radio dramas.
Got it.
COM.
Got it. Yeah, no, I'm very excited. So Rod Serling, who is most known for Twilight Zone, that is not a controversial statement. It was the writer of this, adapted this screenplay, and it's really fascinating. And I don't have any clips of it or anything, but I watched an interview with Rod Serling, not about the man, but just about, actually it was a lot about race. And, he was very forward thinking, was definitely somebody who was a strong advocate for civil rights. And it seemed like it was pretty early that he had developed these, passions for, progressive movement in the civil rights arena. Yeah.
I mean, it's all over. It's all like throughout the Twilight Zone.
Absolutely.
I mean, not just, civil rights and, during the, in the shadow of the communist witch hunts, McCarthyism.
Yeah.
And it, echoes, of course, a lot of what is going on today, especially one of the episodes we did for the show, Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, which is one of my all-time favorite episodes of The Twilight Zone.
Cool.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, Rod Serling, very much like Gene Roddenberry, creator of Star Trek, was very innovative in his use of television and I guess then cinema to and using actually the man is kind of like just the most I guess forward that philosophy is in his writing. It's usually you see it in more of like parables, things like the Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, where
this is very overt. This is extremely clear about what exactly he's trying to say. There's no metaphor in the depiction of the story. And I guess I should get into the synopsis.
Well, yeah, go right ahead.
After the U.S. President and the Speaker of the House are killed in an accidental building collapse, the position of Commander-Chief is suddenly in question, especially given the failing health of the Vice President. The chain of command indicates that the position then goes to the President Pro Tempore of the U.S. Senate, Douglas Dillman. This news is especially troublesome for ultra-right-wing Senator Watson, given that President Dillman is now the first black man to fill the position of president. This news is also concerning for the wife of the Secretary of State, Kay Eaton, who believes her husband should have fought for the position that should be his. At first, Dillman is very passive and in way over his head, essentially regurgitating the talking points provided to him by the Secretary of State. But once he is pushed to speak for himself, President Dillman is proven to be a passionate president with new perspectives, especially when it comes to the first big dilemma of his presidency. An American black man named Robert Wheeler is alleged to have attempted the murder of the South African defense minister. Though Dillman goes on record many times defending Wheeler, indicating that he was in Burundi at the time, a new piece of evidence emerges that shows Wheeler's assassination attempt. Dillman is now faced with eating crow for the good of the truth. Meanwhile, Senator Watson is concerned that Dillman is beginning to get comfortable in his role as president and maybe decide to actually run for the position in the next election. So, Dan, like we said, James Earl Jones plays President Dillman. We have Martin Balsam in there. Burgess Meredith is Senator Watson, and oh man, he's so good.
He
Barbara
reminds me
Rush is Kay Eaton. She's fantastic. Janet McLaughlin is Dillman's daughter, Wanda, and she's great. And she's like she's an activist, and he has to kind of tell her at the beginning to like tone it down for a bit because things are a little different now.
Yeah. Well, she actually is the one. This isn't one of those like where, okay, you're going to have to stop that. She's actually the one who says, I guess I'm going to have to kind of dial it back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. And so when the movie begins at, I want to say it's the Correspondence Dinner. That's what it seems like. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this guy who's cracking wise and totally killing. And, and there's a bit of a, what's up?
Sorry, that guy is, oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. Like he gets a credit.
Well, he's great.
Famous
he's
comedian.
Hilarious.
Why am I'll be back with that name in a moment.
Oh, okay. So during all of that, there's like this kind of like weird little kerfuffle going on, and they just find out in a very kind of anticlimactic way that the president has died. And I'm just going to play a quick clip from the confirmation phone call.
George, we have to have your official confirmation.
You got it. The president, the speaker of the House, and 50 other people. Can you hear me, Arthur?
Yes, George, you're coming through.
It was the Alta Mainzer Palace here in Frankfurt. The building is 500 years old. It just collapsed.
What do you say? What do you even do when you find out that something like that just happens? I mean, there's nothing you can do to really prevent it. There's no person who can, have a finger pointed at them. It's just super unfortunate.
Nobody blames Antifa.
Yeah, they were in Burundi. They're nowhere to be found. Is Burundi one of the places where VP Nance was sent to and Dave? Why does that sound like that was one of? Maybe it might have been.
So, by the way, that's Jack Benny.
Jack Benny.
Right. Who's telling jokes up there. And so I just want to note, so part of the reason why Kay Eaton, Lady McBee in this, she, so much. She, I think is really disappointed because up until 1947, the Secretary of State was fourth in line.
Right.
In the line of succession. So it's president, vice president, speaker of the House.
Yeah. And why don't I just go ahead and play the clip where they're talking about that?
Play the clip.
I'm not
go
the
for
man,
it.
Senator.
That's right.
You're the next in line, huh?
Oh, I'm the Secretary of State, yes, but I'm not the successor.
President, Vice President, Secretary of State in that order.
That's not the case anymore. Is it, Edward?
The Succession Act of 1947 states that the order of succession is President, Vice President, Speaker of the House, President Pro Tempore of the Senate.
Who?
The President Pro Tempore of the Senate.
That's Douglas Tillman.
Yeah, Burgess Meredith is so good.
He reminds me so much of Strom Thurmond. You remember Strom Thurmond?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like
a old racist Southern.
Yep.
Yeah.
And of course, after he died, you found out that he had children, that he had illegitimate children that were mixed race. And
oh, wow.
Which, I mean, yeah, Strom Thurmond, yeah, he was terrible. And but Burgess Meredith does a fantastic job. And he's not actually not I feel like he's not quite he's as insidious as Strom Thurmond, but he keeps it civil, and he's kind of he's a snake, and there's that undertone, and he's like, look, you know what I really think, and I know you know what I really think, and I want you to know that, but I'm not going to come right out and say it, unless he's with the the ambassador from South Africa.
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting moment. But yeah, there's a lot going on just right at the beginning of the movie, which I feel like is where this movie is kind of at its strongest. There's, the beginning, it's very strong. I feel like there's the dinner party scene. That's very strong. The very end, I was kind of trailing off a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So, and I totally understand. And I read this quote from James Earl Jones before watching the movie, and it totally makes sense. But he had said in an interview that had they known this was going to go to theaters, it would have been James Earl Jones, or the production would have asked for more time, more production.
Sure.
Budget.
It was shot on video in a time when, theatrical movies were not shot on video.
No, we're talking about the early 1970s.
Video was barely video.
Yeah. And it plays like that. It plays like, I don't know, like an episode of The West Wing.
Sure. There was a scene where I was even thinking like, this is feeling a little Sorkin-y to me.
Well, it's like the scene when he's, I mean, it's kind of like when he's talking to Wheeler in the Oval Office. So Wheeler tells him that he's.
Just real quick. So Wheeler knows this, I guess, Reverend who knows the president. So Wheeler, who's the, alleged attempted assassin, is just like visiting the White House, pretty regularly. So it seemed a little, I don't know, it didn't seem like something that would normally happen.
Well, it was at the first point because no one knew where he was.
Right.
And then this Reverend shows up with him. And he had asylum with the Reverend, and the Reverend brings him in. But there's no how did you get in here? He's not like, in disguise or anything. But and it sets up a really interesting quandary that he at first tells James Earl Jones, Dillman, that he's innocent and that he was in Burundi and that he even was at the embassy that day.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, it's disproven. And I almost feel like I remember President Bartlett being in some type of similar situation where it's like there's the what I want to do, there's what I know is the right thing to do, and then there's like the knowing the consequences of the right thing to do, which sending a Black American man who at this point the defense minister has died from his wounds.
That's right. Yeah.
So he's an assassin, and they're sending him back to where he is not going to get a fair trial.
Right. And I'm just going to play one clip from the president is doing his first ever press conference, and he is given this whole sheet of like answers, this whole like folder of answers really from Eaton, and everybody can kind of tell, especially this one reporter can tell, who's a Black reporter. He's like, stop reading off your thing, I can tell. And he really starts cutting loose and like speaking from the heart and, telling the way he feels about things rather than being just like kind of an interim president and just kind of like sitting by and, just being the figure, the voice for everybody else that's making all these decisions. And I just wanted to play this part from that press conference.
Mr. President, that this American, whoever he is, if tried in South Africa, he could expect something less than a fair trial?
Something considerably less, yes, Mr. Pierce. I think he'd be prejudged and officially lynched. Now, Mr. Webson, since you broached it originally, let me admit to you that in the short time allotted to me as president, I may never learn the subtleties of foreign relations, but like you, several hundred years of history have made me an expert on lynching.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You've said it all.
So the end part there where the audio changes a little bit, that's his daughter, Wanda, listening to it in the car. And, you can just see the smile on her face, and she's just proud of her father for speaking his mind, for not being a stooge, and for actually saying the things that he should be saying. Somebody who has this ancestry, that has this experience, and they know what it's like. They know that there's not going to be a fair trial. I mean, no matter where he is, but especially in, South Africa.
Definitely not in South Africa in the 1970s.
In the 70s. Yeah.
I mean, they want to charge him here and give him a trial in DC.
Yeah.
On federal crimes.
Right. So they essentially what happens is Wheeler's attorney wants them to be charged in the US for passport fraud. I don't know exactly the phrasing for it, but essentially for using a falsified passport to travel.
Yeah, it's and this is after Wheeler basically confesses to Dillman.
Right. There are so many. There's so much to talk about with this movie, and I know that we're jumping around a lot. Should we continue on this the Wheeler storyline a little bit?
Yeah, we can do that. I did want to say, I don't know. I remember we were talking about, or had an exchange about the Richard Pryor sketch.
Yeah. So in 1977, Richard Pryor did a sketch where he was the first black president. I'll just play a quick little clip from that.
Yeah.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Arthur Williams, Chicago Sun-Herald. You've just okayed a $250 million increase in our space program. What I'd like to know is the main reason you did this so we can finally recruit black people for the space program?
I feel it's time that black people went to space. White people have been going to space for years. And spacing out on us, as you might say. And I feel with the projects that we have in mind, we're going to send explorer ships through other galaxies, and no longer will they have the same type of music, Beethoven, Brahms, and Tchaikovsky. From now on, we have little Miles Davis and Charlie Parker. We're going to have some different kind of things in there.
I mean, so good. The humor of the 70s, I feel, is so tame compared to now.
It's tame, yet it's also, I feel like, much more, I don't want to say not confrontational, but blunt.
Yeah.
There's not as much, and this is not to say that like political correctness and being, culturally sensitive and aware is not a good thing.
Right.
But I think, and that might partially be why a lot of the humor today is so outrageous, because that's kind of how comics can stand out, because,
right.
Richard Pryor, could Richard Pryor have done what he did? Could George Carlin, come up today and become like the legend, George Carlin?
Oh man, I mean, just thinking about like Richard Pryor's stand-up compared to like this type of sketch, very different. And thinking about people like Richard Pryor and George Carlin, of course, and like Lenny Bruce and people like that, it is hard to say how they would fare today, but they're the ones that created the pathway for the comics of today. So it's like, what would it have been had it not been for them?
Well, and that's the other thing is it's also, this was all on network TV. There was no cable. It wasn't like they were going to get an HBO.
No Netflix specials. Yeah.
But also it's like you're on network television, prime time. I mean, Pryor had hosted Saturday Night Live, which I know is not prime time, but is a big...
It's not ready for prime time.
It's not ready for prime still. But... So Pryor had hosted that and like really like pushed the envelope with humor, but yet like network television this movie was going to air on network television.
Yeah.
And and it's funny because you hear, there's some N-bombs in there. And
yeah, right. And well,
but
sorry,
what I was going to say, what I was going to say is, you hear them and I feel like, and today it's you're not going to have that on network TV unless there's a very specific, like it's not going to be in passing, and it's not going to be, it's going to be more like the focus of like whatever show or wherever you're hearing it. And I don't know, there was something about this movie that made me feel like it was perhaps a more honest portrayal of politics than a lot of what we see in fiction, in things like The West Wing.
Yeah. One quick thing I wanted to mention. So I used to live in Los Angeles, and living in LA, I don't know if it happens to everybody, but I certainly met my fair share of former child actors. And one of them, when I met him, his one kind of claim to fame that he kind of mentioned at like the top of his acting game was that he said the N-word on Seventh Heaven. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go over there now.
And the episode was probably focused on his character and like he got
I'm sure. Good for him.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to come back to is that, yes, and one of the things that kind of like comes and goes in this movie very quickly is that Senator Watson wants to try to pass a bill kind of behind Dillman's back a little bit. And Dillman meets with the black members of Congress, I believe, who are concerned about this. He kind of leaves a cabinet meeting early to speak with them, and this is what they say it is.
Senator Watson's bill proposes that the president be prohibited from firing any cabinet member without the express approval of Congress.
Which is another way of making damn certain that you don't step out of line.
Or out of place.
Naturally, we assumed that the bill had been brought to your attention.
We also
Mr.
assume
President.
that you will publicly call it what it is, an affront.
Yeah, I think it's a awesome scene, and it just goes to show you, like you said, he's a snake, and I'm sure that stuff like this happens all the time.
Well, they did. I mean, I don't think they tried to do that exactly, but I think like when Obama was president, Mitch McConnell they did so much. Like, I mean, anything they could do, they kept him from putting a justice on the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then, you know, a few years later, put a justice on the Supreme Court under this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
even,
so,
yeah, exactly.
It's so that's part of the reason why I felt like, you know, especially the portrayal of Watson, and also of the Eatons, and probably more so Kay Eaton, it felt very, very genuine, and it well not maybe not genuine, but it felt like, oh man, yeah, this probably happens more than we would like to think.
Yeah, although nowadays we would certainly hear about it by certain members of Congress who are not afraid to go on Instagram Live and tell people exactly how things are.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That was, I mean, man, you got to shout out AOC for doing that, because. Oh my
God. Yeah.
Anyway, we're not going to go off on.
We're not going to go off on that one. But while you were talking about Kay Eaton, played by Barbara Rush, I mean, such an amazing character, and it's just like, you know, that there's just like hordes of these people, and I love her interaction with Wanda at that dinner party scene, and I wanted to play that. This is I mean, Janet McLaughlin, I don't even know what else she's been in. I know Barbara Rush has been in a ton of stuff, but Janet McLaughlin, who plays Wanda, just so incredible. And yeah, let's just hear a little bit of that scene.
There's been a suggestion made that my father seek the nomination. Indeed? I wouldn't pay too much attention to Washington rumors, my dear. This town is the national headquarters not only for government, but also for gossip, which I disseminate too frequently, my husband tells me.
Yes. Now, since this is the first social dinner in some time, I suggest that we forget all about politics.
Really, I think you should count your blessings, Miss Tillman. Oh? Would you like to list them for me?
Arthur, what's the new Chinese ambassador like? I'm told he's an extremely young man.
Well, the inscrutable East, who
first
can
and foremost,
tell?
Speaking of blessings, is the fortunate fact that your father is really more an interim caretaker than president. I think that should be a cause for Thanksgiving.
I'd like very much to propose a toast now. To the President of the United States, to his good health.
Hear, hear.
And to the Secretary of State, Arthur Eaton.
Perhaps The next president of the United States. You don't like the toast, Miss Tillman, or you don't like the brandy?
Neither one.
Well, speak your mind, child. I usually do. Of course, my husband tells me I make too many judgments. That comes from having a father who was a senator. And a grandfather who's on the Supreme Court.
Oh, I remember your father, Kay. I think it was 37 or 38. I remember he cornered Sam Rayburn.
Oh, Charlie, let's not turn this into a class reunion. Let's hear what Miss Tillman has to say about things.
Like what things, Mrs. Eden? Genealogy? Well, my father was a school teacher, and his father sold catfish in Baltimore.
How interesting.
Isn't it? And I'm sure if we ever figure out a family coat of arms, it will be a crossed pick and shovel over a cotton gin.
Oh, no. Miss Tillman, don't be angry.
Then stop shaking your family tree at me, Mrs. Eaton. That's about as relevant as what Calvin Coolidge had for breakfast.
I love it.
And
that's a long clip. I'm sorry, but it's just so good.
No, and it's also, it's not inaccurate. You have these political dynasties and these
right,
and you have like a lot of that clash going on in Washington. And when she calls him a caretaker.
Oh yeah, and it's great because like everybody else is just trying to kind of change the topic of conversation, and it just keeps on getting pulled back into it. Oh my God!
Well, and Dillman is like grinning. He's trying to hide his grin.
Well, you're right, because he knows that his daughter doesn't take any bullshit from anybody. So,
and speaking, and so coming back to Janet McLaughlin, she had a pretty long career. She, since passed in 2010. Pour one out for Janet McLaughlin, and in fact, it looks like her filmography begins with a role on Star Trek.
Oh, no way.
And she appeared other titles that you'd raise. She was on the Meredith. She did a lot of TV. She was in Sounder.
Okay.
She played Camille Johnson in Sounder. She was in the film Tightrope, 1984 Clint Eastwood movie. She was in Murphy's Law, which was a 1986 movie. The Boy Who Could Fly.
The Boy Who Could Fly.
A wonderful 80s family classic. Big Shots, 1987's Big Shots.
Big Shots.
For Keeps with Molly Ringwald. And Heart and Souls, the Robert Downey Jr., Charles Grodin, Alfre Woodard, et cetera, romantic comedy. And her last credit, 13th Floor.
Okay. Well, she was fantastic. And
yes.
I mean, it's also worth talking a little bit about James Earl Jones, because he got started, was it 1960? I think maybe... Oh, what was he in Dr. Strangelove?
He was in Dr. Strangelove. That was 64.
64. And then, he was just kind of doing, he's in a bunch of stuff. Great White Hope. He did quite a few things before appearing in The Man. And then, of course, was in quite a few more things up until 77 when Star Wars came out. And... as we all know, this guy works. This is and up until present day. Well, coming to America.
Where he'll he's been able to, continue to lend his voice to be Darth Vader. And, also reprised his role in The Lion King, right? As Mufasa. So, James Earl Jones is just, he was in, he's in the Jack Ryan movies, speaking of, with Harrison Ford.
He just blew up,
Field
completely.
of Dreams.
When your first movie is Dr. Strangelove, I think that that things are going to be pretty okay.
You know, in this business, in the business of show, you never know when your next job is, what your next job is going to be. So,
yeah. So, just kind of coming back to The Man, I just wanted to play one more clip, I think, at least one more. Just going back to Burgess Meredith, who we've talked about on this show a lot in the Grumpy Old Men episode. And it's, so for me, you know, obviously he was in the Batman movie, you know, he was the Penguin.
He was the Penguin, yeah.
And then several years later, after The Man, he was in Rocky. So this is still, I mean, he's an older guy, but he's kind of like young Burgess Meredith in the, you know, in the sense of my familiarity with his work.
Compared to Grumpy Old Men, yeah.
Compared to Grumpy Old Men,
21 years later after,
yeah.
You know.
But it's just funny seeing him with just like, you know, a full head of, I mean, I don't know if that was a wig or anything, maybe not, but
no, I mean,
yeah, it's just, and then of course you see so much of the Penguin in him when he's chomping on those cigars, in his little like yellow waistcoat and everything,
and he's scheming, yes.
and he's scheming with the ambassador for South Africa. So in this scene, they have just gotten new film of the of Wheeler actually tossing a grenade, I think, into the car where yeah. So it's very, very damning evidence. So he's showing it first to Watson. So I'll just play a little bit of that.
Has this film been shown to our Justice Department?
Well, we only received it early this morning, Senator.
Should have been sent then. It should have been brought to the attention of our Department of State and the President.
The President? Mr. Dillman? That would be a fruitless exercise, Senator. My government will request the extradition of this man. He happens to be black. And Mr. Dillman, for your information, is also black.
You noticed that, did you? Why did you show this film to me?
Well, you're a man of considerable influence in American politics, Senator. Your views on segregation are not unlike our own. Of course, in my country, we'd never have a black man as the executive of government.
Well, 25 years ago, I could have said the same thing about the United States of America. It's proving very little, except that good ideas are not immortal. They die just like men.
Oh, no. The separation of the races is an idea that's going to die very hard.
Oh, it's already died. You know how I know? I know because I'm going to walk out of here and strike a very damaging blow on behalf of white supremacy. Now, there was a time that I could have done that with a very great sense of accomplishment. But now I do it with kind of sick reluctance, holding my nose as I do.
So interesting. What a fascinating character he is. And I mean, the way that Burgess Meredith plays it is beautiful.
Really, really is. I'd be so interested to know kind of, you know, where what he based his if he based his performance on. I mean, he could have based it on Strom Thurmond.
Could have. Yeah. That dude was around a long time.
Yeah, seriously. He's so slimy, and it's a great movie because I think, or I'm sorry, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a great movie, but it's an interesting movie. Like I enjoyed watching it because I honestly didn't know how it was going. I didn't know how it was going to go at the end.
Right.
When Dillman is faced with the possibility, does he surrender someone, you know, to the fate that he knows he's going to receive at the hands of white supremacy?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to play the clip from when Wheeler is in the Oval Office with Dillman at the very end. And just after this, Dillman does make an official statement about his plans to, send him back to South Africa, and you'll hear that there are a couple of bleeps in here. That's because he does James Earl Jones does say the N-word a couple times, and we just didn't feel comfortable keeping that in. But I'm sure you can use your imaginations.
It's not the point of it.
Yeah.
Do I have a choice, Mr. Wheeler? I believed you were innocent. And I issued no fewer than 3 statements to that effect. I stood before a press conference and played Zola to your make-believe Dreyfus. And here we are today, young Mr. Wheeler, the liar and the dupe.
And if I told you the truth, what kind of help could I have expected?
You keep quiet. Well, that, Mr. Wheeler, is expedient desperation, but it's a long country mile away from a defense.
Mr. President, what I came here this morning to discuss was some possible precedents.
Forget it.
Rob, some recommendations for clemency.
Forget it. He's no different from that freaked-out Charlie Blue-Eyes Senator Watson.
Well, let him at least I read, but this house...
Shut up, for God's sake. I killed a butcher, a lyncher, and I did it because he didn't deserve to live.
He didn't deserve to live. And that is the epitaph that you personally carve on the stone?
With my own 2 hands. And with pride. With the same kind of passion you should have.
With your own 2 hands, Mr. Wheeler, without a doubt. With pride, no, that would seem to be the case. But as for passion, Mr. Wheeler, even a house understands all about passion. Black men don't burn crosses. They don't plant a bomb in a church and kill 4 children. They don't geld innocent little sharecroppers. They don't hunt down a Martin Luther King and shoot him with a telescopic sight. That is cool stuff, Mr. Wheeler. That is bloodless. That is a master plan that comes out of a convocation of lizards. Passion may drive you into the streets to throw bricks or to fire a building or to snipe from a roof. All that is ugly, Mr. Wheeler, but that is passion. But to buy a gun and travel 5,000 miles to seek out a victim, to falsify a passport, to plant an alibi, and then to kill a human being and come back here and feel persecuted because a black man in a high place refuses to accept the politics of a corpse as a measure of your innocence. Don't you call that passion, Mr. Wheeler? You call that what it is. It's arrogance, ignorance, the kind of a selective morality you'd expect from Adolf Eichmann.
James Earl Jones. Both James Earl Jones and George Stanford Brown, who plays Robert Wheeler, are excellent.
Yeah.
And just real quick, so George Stanford Brown, he acted in a ton of stuff, a few movies here and there. He did a lot of television. He directed a lot of television, did a few episodes of Starsky and Hutch, Charlie's Angels, Fantasy Island. He did episodes here and there of some other stuff. He acted in and directed an episode of Police Squad, did a bunch of episodes of Cagney and Lacey, has been active up until pretty recently. He's 77 now, so I'm wondering if he's just retired, but very long career, both acting and directing.
Yeah. And, he is, as you say, he's excellent in this role. He plays it with a ton of conviction, and you really, it's like, he does something that I think a lot of people would want to do. And,
totally.
Especially when, in his position and he sees that this is going on, he sees how Black people in South Africa are being treated, and, he's going to do something about it. And it's interesting. It's also interesting as to like kind of how the movie is commenting on like unrest and civil disobedience in that era, which I feel like it kind of thumbs its nose at civil disobedience, because it does place the value on like the logic. And Dillman, they set it up. He was a former college professor, and Dillman really elocutes the reasoning clearly, and he does it for the press in a in a more restrained way.
Sure, right.
But he makes the same points, and like he really, when he's saying, when he compares him to Adolf Eichmann.
Oh yeah.
It's like, there's no taking that the wrong way. There's only one way to take that.
Right. And I mean, the truth is, yes, South Africa in the 70s, along with many, many years before that and after. It was terrible. And doing what he did, I mean, is extreme. I'm sure that a lot of people would want to do that. But it's like, if you're going to do it, you got to own it. You can't just go hide away. If you're going to do it, go for it. I mean, just think about Nelson Mandela. Spent so many years in prison and
right, and became president of South Africa.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just became such a great figure because of his convictions. And it's like, had Wheeler stayed there and just kind of, I don't know, could have just been executed, but at least he would have, done it knowing that he did something for the good of the cause.
And he wouldn't have hidden. He would have said, yes, this is what I did. This is why I did it. And I accept the consequences.
But instead, he hid behind the first U.S. black president.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And then it ends with Dillman's gonna go speak in front of the convention, and that's where it leaves us. And that's where I was like, made for TV.
Yeah. Watching it at first, I was, because it's available in full on YouTube for free, and the transfer of it is very poor. For the sound clips, I did some noise reduction so that there's not the hiss of a VCR or whatever. So it's it can be challenging to watch just from a technical perspective. But the performances in it really have a lot behind them. The writing, I mean, I wonder what got removed from it. Like, how much more does this book go into that Rod Serling left out? There's got to be just so many. Like, I wonder how far it goes into his career in politics, or I guess he was in politics, but like, his career goes into maybe further into the presidency, perhaps actually being elected.
Or maybe we go further back into his career as, his career in politics. How does he go from being a professor to being, a senator?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so Dan, what would you want to see?
What would I want to see? Well, I was thinking about it, and I think a loose remake, because I was trying to think, I was like, who's someone that like the establishment would kind of just try to like put in a corner and say, okay, you do this, and not kind of worry about them aspiring to more, and who would really threaten the establishment. And I was thinking, of course, like, we mentioned AOC before, and
right, yeah.
But then I was like, if a Muslim woman, if a hijab wearing Muslim woman were through these circumstances to become president, I was like, what would cause? Because also what we don't see in The Man is really a whole lot of like, we don't have a whole lot of like, there was more of a, racist response, at least that we saw, to President Obama.
Right.
Like, there's no birthers. Of course, there's no Twitter, but we don't see that, like, the Ku Klux Klan is rioting outside of the White House or storming the Capitol.
Right.
So, but I was thinking, like, of course, you'd have a loose remake, but I think it's just got to be the idea of somebody who's not just their ideas, but just their existence is seen as a threat by people, and I think that would be kind of the equivalent to this, to really kind of threaten that, to show because who's your senator? Who's going to be your Senator Watson? Like Lindsey Graham or, Rand Paul. But you get, but it's really like, and it's not like it's not far-fetched. I hope it's not, far-fetched. I feel like
feel like
Go
so
ahead.
I mean, nowadays you couldn't do something set in present day about a black person becoming president. We've had a black president, and the shock of everything would be much less so now that we've experienced it for 8 years. And so you're right, it would have to be somebody else. It'd have to be something else that's going on. And what you're talking, I mean, I mentioned this very briefly in the last episode, but on the show Designated Survivor, it's the HUD secretary who ends up becoming president because of an act of terrorism on the Capitol during the
State of the Union
address.
That's
so
why
it's like
he's because everybody else
is the
is
designated
there.
survivor. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it didn't have to be Kiefer Sutherland. It could have been, a Muslim woman who happened to be on the in the cabinet.
Yeah. I feel like it would be interesting. Like, I was trying to think of who could do that, because it would need to be written, and it would really need to be written adeptly.
Right. And also, it really needs to be something that is written and directed by a person of color, a black person or a person of color. Yeah. I mean, that's way less likely to happen in 1972, understandably.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly it is all done by people who are passionate about this message. But, these days we know that that's the right thing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would love to say, I mean, also, of course, like having a film like this that, focusing on a Muslim woman as the principal character, I think it just also opens up, because political films are and have been very male dominated.
Yeah.
When they haven't been, it's not like there's been a lot of women. There's been, like one woman, like you look at The Contender and it's Joan Allen, and then Christian Slater, Gary Oldman, Jeff Bridges. And I off the top of my head, can't think of another woman who's in that movie, but I can easily think of three men. So, even a TV show like Madam Secretary.
Right.
Commander-in-Chief.
With Deep Impact's
Gina Davis.
Taya Leone.
Yep, Deep Impact's Taya Leone, exactly. So
you looked at me for a second like it wasn't her, and I was like, oh no, did I just mix her up with somebody?
No, I don't know what I thought you were going to say, or where. I don't know where that was going, but yeah. Do you have anything did you have anything in mind?
Well, the only thing I was thinking would be to do a remake that is still set in the 70s, keeping it authentic to the original, something close to Rod Serling's script, but maybe adapt it a little bit to address some of the sensibilities of, modern politics, although it would still be set in the 70s. I thought that it would be something that, if it is properly treated like a theatrical movie, then maybe it could go a little bit deeper into, I don't know, certain things, and maybe back off some other things. Expand the character of Wanda a little bit. I thought that she was fascinating. I loved her, and her kind of I don't know, back and forths with Kay Eaton were just so juicy, and I just wanted some more of that. I was thinking that for the president role, reprising his role as president from White House down would be Jamie Foxx. I think that he's just so awesome, and I don't care that he's already been a president before. I think he'd be the right person for this type of thing. You're looking at me like you want to say something.
Oh no, you know what? I was looking at about like, you know, what else that the book might go into. There is an impeachment trial of President Dillman.
Oh boy.
In the novel. So yeah, I'm interested in checking that
just real
out.
quick, I was thinking that a good director for it, and I don't know if this is just because this person happens to be on my mind lately, but Steve McQueen, I think would be an awesome director for it.
Oh, I would be really interested to see Steve McQueen do like a political drama. That would be fascinating. And you know what? Before we go, I forgot this at the beginning, but as we know, we're celebrating Black excellence. And I do have trivia.
Okay.
I do have a Jeopardy for you. And just as a reminder to anyone who didn't hear our last episode, we spoke briefly about Melvin Van Peebles and his remarkable film Watermelon Man. So another, I'm gonna give you the question. Let's see how you do, and then maybe if you need a hint, I'll give you a hint. But this it comes up as we're talking about filmmakers. This director, also was an actor who appeared in one of the only 3 films to sweep the 5 major categories at the Academy Awards: Best Director, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Screenplay, either adapted or original. So before becoming a director, they acted and appeared in one of those 3 movies.
Ooh. That's tough. Jeez. Swept the Oscars. Swept the Oscars as a director?
No, was just in. No. So this director, person currently working as, primarily as a director, who before becoming a director was an actor, and probably their biggest credit is one of the only 3 movies in history to sweep the 5 major categories at the Academy Awards. I know it's a long-winded question.
I know that one of them was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Just thinking about movies that swept the Oscars.
Also, remember, we're celebrating Black excellence.
I know.
So, yeah.
Jeez. Oh my God, that's tough. I want to say, did Network sweep the Oscars? No?
Nope.
I think Network was one of them.
Nope. Network, I think, was the same year as Cuckoo's Nest, or was it the year after? Might have been the year after.
It was the year
Rocky
after.
Won. Yeah. So there are 3 movies in history. One of those movies was It Happened One Night.
It Happened One Night. Okay.
Which is like in the 30s.
Right. So less likely to be what you're talking about. I don't know. I give up.
So the movie that swept the Oscars, the 3rd and most recent movie to sweep all 5 categories, celebrating its 30th anniversary, released 30 years ago this month, 1991's Best Picture Oscar winner, Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, okay.
And the cast member I'm thinking of is Cassie Lemons, who played Clarice's roommate at Quantico.
Oh.
And has since gone on to direct the Academy Award nominated Harriet, the Harriet Tubman biography,
right.
and a movie that I discovered. Well, I wouldn't say I discovered it, but smaller
It came
film
to your attention.
Came to my attention, and I was really into in college. Called Eve's Bayou.
Eve's Bayou. Okay.
Eve's Bayou, which is fantastic, like mystery thriller. It's got Samuel L. Jackson, Lynn Whitfield, and but Cassie Lemons. She also appeared in. She was in the Five Heartbeats.
Cool.
a lot of.
That's the Robert Townsend one, right?
Yeah, Robert Townsend.
Yeah.
She was in Spike Lee's School Days. She was in Candyman. She was in Hard Target. You might remember her in John Woo's Hard Target. But in it looks like in the mid to late 90s, she's done some acting since then, but has been primarily a director, and quite good one. She directed a couple of episodes of the Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker.
Okay.
On Netflix. Directed some episodes an episode of Luke Cage. Oh, she also directed The Caveman's Valentine, also starring Samuel L. Jackson, and
cool.
2007's Talk to Me, starring Don Cheadle.
All right. Love Don Cheadle.
So yeah, Cassie Lemons, hell of a talent. Look forward to seeing a lot more work from her.
Yeah. Now, Dan, there's a segment that I started in one episode a few weeks ago and then have forgotten to follow up on. But I'm going to bring it back this time and see if there are any horses or boats that share a name with the movie of the week, The Man. So, Dan, I ask you, is The Man the name of a horse, a boat, or both?
I'm going to go with both.
Okay, you would be correct. There is one registered boat or ship, I don't know what exactly makes the difference, called The Man, and it is a 23-foot recreational boat built in 1997. And Dan, do you want to guess how many horses there are named The Man?
12.
6.
Oh.
Yeah. So
I was
we
seeing
have some in
double,
here
so-
born in 2001, 99, 1950, 2001, 2006, and one Irish tinker horse who has no further information. So there you go. But let me tell you a little bit about the earliest one, the one from 1950. That was born. It's quarter horse. Father Pacos and mother Peggy Long. Let's see. We've got some family members named Dunny Boy, Ace Mare, Ben Hur. If we're going with movies, and yeah, just thought you'd like to know a little bit of information about a horse named The Man.
I'm imagining one of these horse family reunions, and it's like, oh, hey, cousin Mama's lucky day.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that you, Yellow Jacket?
Yeah.
That's right. So anyway,
Spasmataz. Spasmataz.
I'm actually curious to see if there are any boats that are named Air Force One, or if that is frowned upon.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I wonder. You probably can't do that, but maybe you can. I wonder if you can, like, play around with it a little bit.
Let's see. Air Force One. We have 2 boats called Air Force One. Wow. One of them was just built last year, a passenger boat. Interesting.
Get off my boat.
It's a 31-foot. Wow, there's a lot of information on this one. Interesting. It can. It is 13 gross tons. Okay. Interesting. Vessel call sign WDL8686. Just so everybody knows, Air Force One, the boat. So anyway, nobody cares. There's that information.
I wish it was actually called Air Force One: the boat.
The boat. And just because I'm curious, I'm going to look up and see about horses named Air Force One. I'm not even going to bother looking for any called Dave. Yeah, we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3. We have 13 horses named Air Force One, dating back to, let's see, 1970. Yeah, 1970. So just a little bit of information about Air Force One. Born to Dawson's Cora and Air Freight. Such notable relatives as Ann Wilson's daughter, Wimpy 2, Dawson's Daisy, and of course, Jean Ann Blair.
Wait, is there a horse named Ann Wilson's daughter?
There is a horse named Ann Wilson's daughter.
And is it owned by Ann Wilson of Heart?
So this one, the original Ann Wilson horse was born in 1927. So the original Ann Wilson,
but not Ann Wilson of Heart.
I can't imagine.
Barracuda.
Yeah. Heart,
Seattle's own. Heart's awesome.
Yeah, that's right.
God.
So,
yeah.
Dan, anything else you want to talk about with the man or horses or boats or anything like that?
No, just I'm glad that to have watched The Man. It's a really interesting. It's a really interesting movie, and definitely more interesting to look at, especially with the hindsight of history. And
sure.
Yeah. But I'm ready. We can reveal what we're going to talk about next time.
Sure. All I'm just going to say is that, I do encourage people to check this out. It's on YouTube. It's free. It's 90 minutes. Maybe drink a cup of coffee first because there are parts that get a little slow. But ultimately, it's a good watch. It's a good watch.
Yeah. And I mean, if you watch it on a phone or a tablet or something, the quality won't be that bad.
Yeah.
So. Don't project this on your 100-inch screen. Yeah. All right. So for our next and I guess final episode of our presidential movie month, we honor the very first
another Gabriel, not Trekkie's Gabriel.
No, different Gabriel. This one is Gabriel over the White. And actually, I don't think a character named Gabriel, but we've got Gabriel over the White House starring Walter Houston as President Judd Hammond, the very first fictional president on film, at least according to the internet. And
wasn't Gabriel over the White House the original title for Live Free or Die Hard?
Gabriel hacking the White House.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. For those of you Live Free or Die Hard fans, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah. And Dan,
shout out Timothy Oliphant.
Oh my God. All day, every day. Buy our Oliphant shirt on tpublic.com. All that information's in the episode description. That's where you can see all of our social media stuff and everything.
And you can email us, let us know what you're thinking at ruinedchildhoodspod@gmail.com.
Yep. Links to everything are going to be in the episode description. And Dan, as you are running for president, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.